She warned them once. They didn't listen, but when they turned her backyard into their personal water park, she made sure they'd never do it again. Before we dive in, tell me, what would you do if strangers kept sneaking into your backyard? Drop a 1 in the comments if you'd fight back, or a 2 if you'd try to ignore it. If you love stories of justice served, smash that like button and subscribe. And if you don't, well, prove me wrong by hitting like anyway. But whatever you do, stick around until the end, because what she did to stop them, they never saw it coming. Trust me, you don't want to miss this. Let's get into it. Alyssa Carter had worked too hard for this. At 41, she had built a life she was proud of. A beautiful home in Austin, Texas, with a backyard that was her personal escape from the world. Tall oaks lined the fence, providing shade over the crystal-clear pool she maintained with meticulous care. She wasn't flashy, but this was hers, every inch of it, bought with sweat, sacrifice, and relentless determination. That's why, when she came home one evening and saw the wet footprints trailing from her backyard to the sidewalk, something in her snapped. At first, she thought maybe a maintenance worker had stopped by. But then, there it was, a damp towel thrown carelessly over her fence. The pool float had been moved. An empty soda can sat on her lounge chair like a mocking reminder that someone had been there. Someone had invaded her space. Her jaw clenched as she scanned the yard, heart pounding. Who the hell thought they could just waltz into her home like it was a public park? When she asked around, the responses infuriated her. Oh, it's probably just some kids. One neighbor laughed. Another, barely glancing up from his car, muttered, "Can't blame 'em. You've got a nice setup." That's when Alyssa realized this wasn't just some harmless prank, this was entitlement. And if they thought they could keep getting away with it, they were dead wrong. Alyssa tried to let it go, she really did. Maybe it was just a one-time thing, maybe some dumb teenagers got curious and wouldn't dare try it again. But deep down, she knew better. And sure enough, a week later, she got her answer. It was a Sunday afternoon, and she had just settled into her couch with a cup of coffee when she heard it. Splashes. At first, she thought it was just the wind rustling the trees, but then came the unmistakable sound of laughter. Carefree, bold, like they belonged there. Her stomach twisted. Oh, you have got to be kidding me. She stormed to the back door and yanked it open. There, in her pool, was a teenage boy, floating on her pool float, arms spread wide like he was lounging at a resort. On the edge of the pool sat a girl, probably his sister, dangling her feet in the water, casually sipping a soda like this was some neighborhood hangout. For a second, Alyssa just stood there, rage boiling beneath the surface, the audacity. Then her voice sliced through the air like a whip. "Excuse me?" The boy jerked upright so fast he nearly fell off the float. The girl's drink slipped from her hands, splashing into the water. The boy scrambled out of the pool, dripping and wide-eyed, hands raised like he'd just been caught committing a crime, which, technically, he had. I thought," he stammered, glancing at his sister for backup. "You thought what?" Alyssa snapped, stepping forward. "You thought you could just help yourself to someone else's property?" The girl mumbled something about living a couple houses down before grabbing her towel and bolting toward the gate. The boy hesitated, then ran after her without another word. Alyssa's hands trembled as she locked the gate behind them. This wasn't just kids being kids. This was trespassing. And the worst part? They weren't even embarrassed. They weren't even sorry. So she did what any reasonable person would do. She went to their parents. But instead of the apology she expected, she got laughed at. "Oh, come on," the mother scoffed, arms crossed like Alyssa was the crazy one. "They're just kids, it's hot. What's the big deal?" Alyssa felt her pulse hammering in her ears. "The big deal," she said, her voice deathly calm, "is that this is my home, my pool, my property, and I don't remember handing out invitations." The father let out a scoff of his own, arms crossed. "You're being dramatic." Dramatic. That word. That infuriating, dismissive, condescending word. Alyssa's fingers curled into fists. Dramatic? Dramatic was when a kid ran screaming over a scraped knee. Dramatic was getting worked up over a minor inconvenience. This question mark. This was straight-up disrespect. She forced a tight smile. "You know what? Fine. Let's see how dramatic I get when the cops show up next time. She turned on her heel and walked away, their indignant protests ringing in her ears. They thought she was overreacting. They thought she'd let it go. But they had no idea what was coming. What do you think? Was Alyssa being dramatic, or was this pure entitlement? Comment. Not on my watch. If you think she had every right to fight back. Have you ever dealt with neighbors who crossed the line? Share your story below, because let's be honest, some people just don't get it until it's too late. But trust me, this isn't over. They thought they could laugh in her face. Oh, they had no idea what she was about to do next. Keep watching, because the payback, it's going to be epic. If you're loving this story, hit that like button and subscribe. The next part, let's just say, they're about to learn the hard way. Stay tuned. Alyssa had tried being reasonable. She had confronted the kids, warned the parents, tightened the locks, even installed security cameras. She had done everything short of calling the cops, thinking maybe, just maybe, they'd take the hint. For 2 whole weeks, it seemed like they had. No more wet footprints, no more floating soda cans, no more uninvited guests. Maybe they'd finally learned their lesson. But then came Saturday. Alyssa had been out running errands, enjoying what she thought was a peaceful, uneventful afternoon. But the second she pulled into her driveway, something felt off. Her side gate, the one she always kept locked, was slightly open. Her stomach dropped. Gripping her keys, she strode toward the backyard, heart pounding with every step. And when she turned the corner, she froze. Her yard was packed, not just with kids, not just with teenagers, with adults. A full-blown pool party was happening in her backyard. Lounge chairs were occupied, beer bottles littered the ground, a folding table had been set up with chips, soda, even a damn Bluetooth speaker blasting music. A group of women waited in her pool, chatting like they were at a country club. And leaning against the pool ledge, drink in hand, was none other than Sandra, her smug, entitled neighbor from 3 houses down. The moment Sandra spotted Alyssa, she had the audacity to wave. "Hey girl, hope you don't mind. It was so hot today, we figured we'd cool off." Alyssa saw red. Her voice, when it came out, was ice cold. "Every single one of you, get out." The music cut out, the laughter died. People exchanged awkward glances, as if she was the one ruining the fun. Sandra scoffed. "Oh, don't be like that, it's just a pool. You weren't even home." That was it. Alyssa stormed over to the pool equipment box, grabbed the remote, and with one furious press of a button, shut off the pool filter. The water stilled, the jets stopped, and then, with a sharp yank, she pulled the power cord to the speaker, plunging the party into complete silence. She turned back, eyes blazing. "I don't care if I was in Paris, Sandra. This is MY property. You don't pay my mortgage. You don't clean my pool. And you sure as hell don't get to treat my home like your personal water park." Someone muttered, "Geez, what's her problem?" Alyssa's fists clenched. "My problem?" She took a step forward, her voice slicing through the humid air. "My problem is that I told you all to stay out, and you laughed in my face. My problem is that I've been nothing but patient, and you took that as permission. My problem is that none of you have an ounce of respect." That got them moving. Drinks were snatched, towels were grabbed. Within minutes, the once lively party scattered like roaches. But Sandra? She rolled her eyes as she strutted past Alyssa. "You don't have to be so uptight," she muttered. Alyssa leaned in, voice like a blade. "And you don't have to be so entitled." Sandra huffed and stomped off. Alyssa stood there, chest rising and falling, hands on her hips as the last unwelcome guest disappeared through the gate. This wasn't over. They had zero respect for her boundaries, which meant the next time they tried, she was going to make sure they regretted it. Alyssa had tried everything, talking, reasoning, cameras, locks, but none of it mattered. These people weren't just trespassing anymore. They were mocking her. That pool party? That wasn't an accident. It was a message. They were daring her to do something about it. So she did. That night, she sat at her kitchen table watching the security footage from earlier that day, replaying every smug grin, every dismissive laugh. They really thought they could get away with it. Not anymore. The next morning, she made 2 stops. First, the hardware store. She picked up heavy-duty locks, the kind that couldn't be picked or broken easily. one for the side gate and one for the pool equipment box. The old locks had been strong, but these were unbreakable. Then she went online and ordered something special, something that public pools use to catch rule breakers. A little trick called pool dye. It wasn't dangerous, just harmless chemistry. But if someone peed in her pool, the water would turn bright neon green. It was petty, it was hilarious, and it was just the start. Alyssa wasn't just setting up defenses, she was playing offense. She needed something that would make these people think twice before ever stepping foot in her yard again. So, she made one final stop, a local sign shop. She walked in, placed an order, and by the next morning, a brand new sign was drilled onto her fence. Warning, pool chemically treated for unauthorized use. Exposure may cause rash, severe itching, or temporary skin discoloration. Was it true? Nope. Did it sound terrifying? Absolutely. And just to sell it? She borrowed an old hazardous chemical container from a friend who worked in maintenance and placed it right next to the pump. Now, all she had to do was wait. And it didn't take long. That afternoon, she sat by her window, sipping iced tea, watching the street. Then movement. A couple of teenagers slowed down as they passed her fence. They spotted the sign, stopped. One of them whispered something, then pointed at the chemical container. Within seconds, they turned around and walked away. Alyssa smirked. Later that night, she checked Facebook. Sure enough, there it was. A post from Sandra in the neighborhood group. FYI. Looks like Alyssa put some kind of weird chemical in her pool. The sign says it causes rashes. Not sure how safe that is. Just a heads up. The comments flooded in. OMG, what if it leaks into the ground? That doesn't sound legal. Why does she even care so much? It's just water. Alyssa laughed out loud. They weren't mad because she had lied. They were mad because they knew. Their free ride was over. And if they wanted to test her, they were more than welcome to try. Was Alyssa's move brilliant or too much? Comment smart move. If you support her or too far, if you think she overdid it. Ever had to deal with entitled people like this? Share your story in the comments. Like and subscribe if you're loving this. The final showdown? You won't believe what happens next. Stay tuned. Alyssa had won the first round. The fake chemical warning had spooked them. The freeloaders had backed off. The entitled neighbors were grumbling but keeping their distance. But she knew it wasn't over. Not yet. Because people like Sandra didn't take no for an answer. And sure enough, it only took 3 days before the knock came. It was a Thursday evening when Alyssa heard it. Loud, impatient banging on her front door. She didn't even have to look. She knew who it was. Taking her time, she set down her drink, straightened her posture, and peeked through the peephole. Sandra. Arms crossed, face twisted in irritation. Alyssa exhaled slowly. Here we go. She opened the door, keeping her expression cool, controlled. Yes. Sandra didn't waste time. We need to talk. Alyssa raised an eyebrow. Do we? Sandra let out an exaggerated huff. Look, I don't know what your problem is, but people are saying you put dangerous chemicals in your pool. Alyssa blinked. Then, without missing a beat, she smirked. I did, she said smoothly. To keep out uninvited guests. Sandra's jaw clenched. You can't do that. What if a kid touches the water? Alyssa folded her arms. A kid who broke into my yard? Sandra faltered. That's not the point. Alyssa took a slow step forward. Oh, but it is. I told people to stay out. They didn't listen. So I took precautions. Sandra scoffed. You're ridiculous. She threw her hands in the air. You don't even have kids. It's just sitting there going to waste. Alyssa tilted her head. So because I don't have kids, my pool is public property? Is that how this works? Sandra rolled her eyes. Oh, come on, don't act like... No. Alyssa's voice was sharp now. You come on, Sandra. You and the rest of these people have some nerve. You don't pay my mortgage. You don't clean my pool. You don't cover my water bill, but you think you're entitled to use it? Sandra's face turned red. Well, maybe if you weren't so unfriendly, people would actually like you. Alyssa let out a low, humorless laugh. That's your problem, isn't it? You think being liked means letting people walk all over you. Sandra opened her mouth, closed it, then shook her head in frustration. You know what? Forget it. She turned on her heel. Enjoy being the mean neighbor. Alyssa leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Enjoy using your own hose this summer. Sandra stomped off without another word. Alyssa shut the door, grinning. They were mad, but they had finally gotten the message. And just to be sure, she had one more trick up her sleeve. Alyssa knew entitlement didn't die easily. People like Sandra didn't just walk away. They waited, watching for weakness, so she made sure there wasn't any. The next morning, she added one final touch, a motion-activated sprinkler system along her fence. If anyone so much as stepped foot near her backyard again, they'd get a freezing cold wake-up call. But the best part? She never even had to use it. Because after that confrontation, no one dared to try again. No more random towels, no more soda cans, no more entitled neighbors acting like her backyard was a public pool. For the first time in months, her home was peaceful again. She hadn't needed to call the cops. She hadn't needed to fight. She had simply set boundaries and enforced them. Because here's the truth, some people don't respect limits until they're forced to. Alyssa had tried being nice. She had given warnings. But the second she flipped the script, they backed off. And she finally got her house back. In 2025, personal boundaries are more important than ever. With social media normalizing entitlement and public spaces feeling less private, Alyssa's story is a powerful reminder. Your space is yours, and no one has the right to take it from you. Whether it's your home, your time, or your energy, people will take as much as you allow. Alyssa's determination to stand her ground proves that setting boundaries isn't about being rude. It's about demanding respect. And in a world where people feel entitled to what isn't theirs, those who fight for what they own will always come out on top. What do you think? Was Alyssa's approach justified? Should she have gone even further? Drop a comment and let's talk about it. And if you support Alyssa standing up for herself, hit that like button and share this story. Because in 2025, respecting boundaries isn't an option, it's a necessity.